Well, welcome to Watercolor Studio 42, and the weather's been so darn hot lately that I thought, and my wife suggested I do a painting that was a little bit cooler. Last week I did something that was a little bit tropical. I keep, in the background here, I keep a picture of what I've done the previous times that I've visited to do a painting at the studio. Today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Hopefully it's a little bit cooling, and maybe it will help maybe turn the temperature down a little bit, the weather we've been having lately. Okay, so we'll get started. Now, I usually do a very quick sketch with the pencil. And when I say quick, I mean very, very spontaneous. And then I kind of go over that a little bit with a marker. I use maybe a fine tip marker. I thought I had one out here, but I don't know if I have one handy or not. It's hiding somewhere out here. But anyways, we'll use one of these. And what I'll do is just do this very quickly. And I don't never do I spend an awful lot of time being too overly fussy with my sketches. I try to do for the most part, I do something a little bit more spontaneous. And even when I paint it in, sometimes I'm a little bit loose with the brush strokes and things like that. So what this picture is here is from one of these Veterans of Foreign War calendars. They have some nice pictures. There's a couple more months of this particular calendar that I probably will do pictures of. Now, I take the liberty a lot of times of moving or leaving out something, maybe adding something to the picture, whatever it might call for, that type of thing. So I'm just going to do this very loosely and see what we can do. Now, this is a kind of a winter scene, and it's a log cabin setting back. And in the particular picture, there's a lot of cut logs in the foreground that are kind of coated with snow. You see the ends of the log a little bit. So there's some of those that you might see a few bumps here and there, something like this. And then there's another little area here that you could indicate. Now, as far as the roof goes, the cabin itself, the wood it's like a log cabin, and it's going to have snow on the roof, so that's going to be the white is the paper for the most part. And then a lot of times pictures have the trees in the background. It almost is like an umbrella type of thing over the building. So what I do a lot of times, here's the shape of the roof in here. And what I do a lot of times is I do the trees, but I'll have the trees kind of pick up somewhere in here. A lot of trees, I just kind of suggest where the trees go. And the log cabin the cabin's going to be in this area. And then you've got some other trees. Now, I kind of keep an opening. I don't put all the trees in the background, but you could indicate maybe there's some mountains off in the distance over here, and you see a little bit of sky. So, and then off here in the background, you can pick that up with a few more trees that are going to be off over in here, okay? Fill all that in with trees. Then we got the ground. We'll make the snow a little bit deeper here, and bring that right out to the edge of the paper. We can have a few more trees off into here. And The building has like a little window up in here, which suggests where that might eventually be. Maybe another couple of windows on the side. And then the side of the building is going to be just, it's like a log cabin. So you'll just see maybe some of the logs laying across, how they interlock them. I used to do a lot with, when I was younger, I think they still have them, Lincoln logs that you can build these little log cabins. And I don't know if they still have them in the toy departments in stores now, but they used to call them Lincoln logs. And you could build your own little log cabin. We thought of, when we were thinking of having a house built, that we'd have a log cabin type of house. But I'm glad we decided not to, because they're not the warmest or last as well as some of the other type of material. Right now we have vinyl siding over the wood that we had on the house. So this is pretty much the idea as a sketch. Just very kind of loosey-goosey type of thing here. And then I'm going to start off put in some sky. Now usually when I do the sky, I just wet the paper a little bit up here, just with clean water across the top. We'll put some water up in here. I don't want to put too much water on because I want it to kind of set up a little bit and not take forever to dry. And we kind of fill this in here. Maybe we're going to have a lot of trees filling in this part here, around in here. And I usually put, for the most part, I put the background in and build the paintings from the back to the front. You'll see what I'm doing. This is when I'm doing like a landscape, painting outside. Here we go. We're going to get enough water on there. Then we take a little bit of our blue. I got some over here somewhere. Here we go. And you've wet the paper, so you're just going to put some of that sky in there like this. Now, you don't want to spend a lot of time scrubbing away. In this particular picture here, we're sort of detracted with the calendar part of it, but the sky has some sort of bands of blue and clouds in there, but because you put the water on first, you're going to get nice soft edges and the water will settle in. Now, if I painted wet onto dry paper, then you might see too much of a hard edge on the clouds. But I'm just going by what the picture is doing here. Looks like it's just a solid mass of color over in here. Now, because I put tape around and create a false edge, I want to make sure that's dark enough so it has contrast on the edges. Here you go. We got the little brush around. I'm using a round brush, probably a number, looks like a number 12. Okay, we'll put this in here. Now you can always go a little bit darker if you so desire in places. While the paper's still wet, it's going to settle in soft. We can put a little bit more over in here. A lot of times I'll use a sort of a, instead of using my little blue, which is like cerulean, it has a little green to it in the blue. Sometimes I will use like the ultramarine. It's a little darker blue, and it wouldn't have so much green to it. Okay, but this is all right for now. Now, a lot of times if you want, you use your brush like a sponge, and you can pull through that while the paper's wet and take some of the color out if you want to make the sky a little bit streakier there. Okay, let's come down on the sides here. Because I don't make too many pencil marks and lines, I can kind of make some of the edges sort of soft, like the background in here, over in here. I can keep that softer, and it kind of blends into the background of the paper. And we could take some of that blue, and we could dash some of that through here in the foreground. I may add a little bit of Payne's gray into that a little bit later on down the road. We'll see what we can do. All right, leave that a little darker shade there. Okay. Now all of this that I'm putting on is soft washes, and I didn't wet down in through here. What I'm doing now is painting with a wet brush onto dry paper. So it may have a few edges. If you want the edges to soften out, like that's a hard edge there, I'm going to leave that. I'm going to leave that in there. And I can have another hard edge maybe over here. Just leave that in. But take the top off. See how you take the top off? Like something like this. There you go. Okay, something like that. I'm just going to add a little dash of contrast in there for now. That's going to be some trees eventually, some fir trees. Okay, you see how much you can cover? I mean, you can get a lot of paint into this thing in a hurry. You can do a lot with it. Okay, and this is going to have some logs kind of showing through here a little bit. We'll get back to that. And this is going to be browner color through here. A little bit of brown over in here. We'll see what we can do with that. Okay? A lot of times, if you don't want your colors to get too mixed up here, I usually rinse the brush off a little bit and then wipe it with a towel and do it a couple of times to make sure I don't have the other color left on the brush. If I'm using the same brush, you can switch it to another brush if you'd like. When I paint, I've got a lot of brushes. I got piles of brushes all over the place, but I usually only end up using probably 3 brushes at best in a painting, and sometimes I'll use a marker or 2 or whatever I want to add to the picture. Now, let's start with some of these lighter colors. I'm just going to dash a little bit of this into here, put a little bit up under here. This is on the log cabin, and then maybe a little bit of color in here. You can put a little bit of that color that's going to be going into the trees here if you want, just to perk it up a little bit. Okay, something like that. Okay, just to dash some of that color around. I don't know if you want to add a little yellow into some of the logs here. You can drop some color in if you want. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 places. I'm big into uneven numbers. So it's usually 1 of this or 3 of this or 5, whatever. How am I doing on the trees? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Okay. Now I'm just kind of dabbling around, just distribution of color here, and I can decide what I want to go back to. Now I've got some green. I've got some blue that I've used for the sky and a little bit of the snow. We can take a little bit of yellow now, mix it with that blue that I had, put a little bit more yellow in that. Stir it around. If you want to make it a little darker, you can. Okay. For the most part, let's see, I might have a little bit too much of one color or the other. But now I can come back in, and usually what I do when I'm doing the trees, I do some of the more of the solid color. I'm going to put some green color into here, and I leave a little bit of open. Now, if I want to show some snow, I can either spatter this, with some white paint, or I can just, when it dries well enough, I just take my little pick and pick some of the paint off the paper and expose some of the white paper underneath. So let's do this side. Let's fill all of that in a bit. Again, it's just a matter of just dabbling around, and I've got some trees going in back of the roof here. Okay, so a little bit of that. Let's give it a little bit more of a shape. A little bit of a point there. I may have to use a finer brush. Oh yeah. Use one of my rigger brushes. And we'll get some trees in back here. And come down on the side of the building, a little bit there. The trees are supposed to be in back, so that's why we're doing this. Filling that in. So kind of filled in pretty solid through there. Like I said, you can always spatter that with a little bit of white paint, or you can pick at it, pick some of the paint off. Okay, we'll come down with the ground line, maybe put the ground line across there, pick it up on this side. Okay, let's go over here, and we're going to make this so it's a clean cut line on the edge of the roof here. And what we're going to do here is fill that in again with more of a solid color. Now I can leave that open in there if I want, so that we don't have to go all the way across with the umbrella roof there that I talked about earlier. Sometimes I leave it open so you see a little bit of the roof against the sky. I do that more often than ever. Sometimes it gets a little bit too heavy. It looks like the trees sometimes are actually growing out of the roof of the objects. Okay. Now this is just a matter of just filling in. You can get different shades. It kind of gets hazy back there a little bit. And this has to come down on the side. We'll make that edge a little bit clean cut there of the cabin, and just pull that back. And that will go across over into here, right across to the edge of your paper. You notice these are lighter shades of green right now that I'm using or putting in. And fill that in a little bit more. You can let some of the white paper show through. If you don't want to leave it white, you can always, fill it in. Like I said before, you can either lift something out, scratch it out, or you can kind of blot it out. Just make that a little, fill that in a little bit more there. There you go. Maybe. I had like a healing background, but if you don't want to leave that in, you don't have to. I might leave it in a little bit, but not much. It's not in the picture anyways. Come across over in here. Okay. Now, what I try to do is paint relatively loose. You don't want to get too uptight with anything that you work on, if you don't have to. See what else? It gets darker in places. You're going to see some dark spots here and there. And just bring that down. Okay. Now, what else do we? I think I'm going to give that green a little bit of time to settle in, and we'll put some color on the building itself, maybe do some color with the logs. Now, we could start off with a lighter shade. I think I've got some raw sienna here, and we could put some of that on the building. Now, that can go in here. Whoops. I get more paint on the brush here. And that could go under the eaves. Now, there's going to be some icicles and things hanging down, so you don't have to be too fussy with the edge of the building that much. You can kind of just wiggle the brush around here. And you know how if you get a storm, sometimes the snow will stick to the side of the building. So it looks like that's what's happening here, okay? Let's do the side over here underneath. Make that a little bit dark. Now what I'm going to do is put some white paint in there and make that sort of more like the icicles hanging off the roof. Okay, where are we here? Okay, I want to put a little bit more of that darker color in. Right across here. Now, you don't have to be fussy. If you want to make the side of the barn a little straighter, that's okay. But as far as it goes, it looks like it's sort of like patchwork. There's a siding that runs like this in here. Then the logs are going to be cutting across this way. They're going to be going this way. So by the time you get through with everything, it's a little bit of everything running together. And what you have to do is just kind of make it more suggestive. You look at the picture, you see a little dark spot here or there. Yeah, just put it in, see if it works. Put a little dark up in here, maybe a little dark under this eave here. You know, that type of thing. You can work on that. And if it looks too busy, I just kind of solidify that a little bit more. Take some of the lines out of there. Here you go. Come down here. This can be a little bit discolored over in this area. Break that up somewhat, okay? That's how that works. There you go. See how that, you could just wiggle the brush around and just kind of capture a little bit of some of the darker areas. You don't have to get too fussy. This type of picture, if I try to put in all the paint, the sash and all that, forget it. It's too far away to see that much detail. So what I do, if there's a window, I just take the brush and put a little dab here and there. It's more suggestive of the window. But what we want to do is just get some paint on there. This can go back here. This looks a little bit bumpy in here. Let's just kind of clean that up a little bit on this side. And just fill it in somewhat. I'm going to leave that white, make it look like the snow up against the building. Okay, now let's take that same color we have, and we're going to do a little bit of the logs. Just a little bit of paint in there, a couple of loops. Don't spend a lot of time being too fussy with it. Just paint those in, the ends of logs, and how many you put in the picture here. There's probably 5 or 6 or 7 or 8, I don't know. I'm not counting too many of them. So you just suggest some little dark spots in there. And there's something over here that's a little bit dark. Let's just put a little bit of dark areas in here. Just a little bit of contrast there. And this depends on you, how much you want to spend with it. You could make, like in here, you could make like a path. Let's jump back into the blue again. You can make sort of like a little footpath into here, something like that. To put footprints in there, whatever there might be, you know, that type of thing. And you take that color, and you can also use that maybe in some of the background. Take that color, put it back over in here somewhere. Put it in the trees. Distribution of color. Now, whether you keep it that way, that's up to you. But at least you're introducing some color in there. A lot of times I'll do a painting, and I'm working so darn spontaneous with it. I'll put a color in some place, and then the next day I look at it, I said, I don't remember doing that particular area or putting that particular color in, because you're doing it so spontaneously, you're not even thinking about it that much. I was going to say not thinking at all, but I don't want to say that. I guess you have to do some thinking, what you're doing, I hope. But anyway, yeah. See how it just kind of moves the color around. You can even drop a little bit of that coloring in there if you want. Now, in this particular picture, a lot of times what you have to do is let certain things dry a little bit. You let it dry out. Now, what I want to do is start working maybe a little deeper with some of the green in the background. So here I have that blue. I could still use that particular shade of blue. Put some green into it. Oh, I should say yellow to make it green. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead of myself here. And see what we can do with that. We got to come back into the picture. We're just going to, if it's dry enough, we can just kind of start suggesting some more color. Where you want it to be show up darker in the background, you can just do some coloring with it. Probably in the back here, it's going to be a little bit deeper. Work that out. See what we can do here. Just drop the paint around, you know, different places. Maybe push this up into here, a little bit more into here. Show more of the texture of the trees and whatnot. Just keep it loose. There we go. You see something that's a little bit not quite right, you just touch it up. Touch it up a little bit. I like that blue is in there, even though you don't see so much blue on the photo here, but we'll put it in anyways. Drop some of that in there. You see how that kind of perks it up a little bit? I hope. I hope. Oh well. Give it the trees a little bit more of more of a tip to them, more of a point to them. Now you can keep filling this in, you know, quite a bit. I just keep it kind of loose and whatnot. Make it interesting. You can put in as much texture as you want. Later on, I could give this another coat And I'd use my rigger with a very fine brush. I think the ground always gets darker down lower. So let's give this another coat of paint over in here. If you can wiggle the brush around in there. And we can go across over into here. How that works. See how that works? Just paint across here. Okay. Now after a while, you can kind of get used to what watercolor does. And at first, what happens is a lot of times when you're starting off, you're a little bit being overly cautious. And after a while, once you get used to a little bit, you don't have to be so uptight with the brushwork. And you let some of these colors work. Let some of them kind of blend in on their own. And another thing that you want to keep in mind is that the colors do change a little bit when they dry out. Now, if anything, everything gets a little bit lighter. So if you think something looks a little bit too dark right now, it may not look that way tomorrow morning when you look at your picture. Okay, I'm going to come across here a little bit more. Put some of this darker color into there. And see what happens down in here. I don't want to get too much of that in there, but just kind of bring out a little bit more of a stronger contrast with around the base of the trees and the background. Now, if that gets too bumpy, I just take some of that off, smooth it off, and wiggle the paint up, push it up into underneath here. And do the same thing on this side. Take that same color and kind of push that up underneath here. There you go. This looks kind of funny right in here. But I don't think I have to worry too much about that. What I might do when I go back and do some touch-up with my white paint, I'll just kind of clean that up in there with the white paint. Get some of this roof. Edge here looks kind of bumpy, so I'm just going to clean up the back end here and wiggle the brush up and down here. Give it a little bit more contrast on the back end. Now, let's see. Things are looking halfway decent, not bad. That's kind of, you might think that's a little bit too much blue in there. And we can always take some of that blue out. I use the brush like a sponge a lot of times. I could take some of that away. You don't have to have that much blue in there. Now, sometimes you could make that like a little brook or a stream, that might be running through there. Of course, during the winter, it might be frozen over, so you have to give it the effect of looking like ice. Now, just as soon as you wet an area, you can erase some of the brush marks if you want it to look less detailed. You can just erase some of the edges. And what I like about watercolor is that you use a kind of a mix of soft edges and hard edges. It just makes the painting look more natural. It doesn't look like it's too mechanical, If you just kind of break up some of the edges. You got to have some edges that are sharper than others, but you don't have to go too much into that. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of texture with the barn. Probably use my little thin rigger there, and I call it a barn. It's a shed, I guess, or it could be a house, whatever, whatever. But let's do a little bit more cleaning up down here. Well, you know, this looks a little bit kind of, needs a little bit of touch up here. Clean this up across here. Okay. I'm always using that word cleaning up. And what I'm referring to is kind of taking some of the busyness away from it, make it more of a solid color. There you go. Okay. It's looking pretty well. Leaving some of that blue shading in there in spots kind of makes it look a little bit more interesting. Okay, where are we here? What else? What else? The only thing I can think of, well, there's a lot of things I can be thinking about, but I was thinking maybe I should just show a little bit more texture on those logs. Maybe some more shading in there. A little bit more shadow. I don't want to get too carried away with all that. Maybe put something more in the corner so it has more of a contrast there against the white edge. Up in here, even though it probably doesn't show up as much, it's not so noticeable. The artist has to kind of, in places, exaggerate a little bit more. You know, especially where the paper's coming up against the white edge. You just want to make more of a contrast through here. There you go. Okay, back here, maybe a little bit more. I haven't forgotten, I'm going to touch up a little bit more with the white too. Put some more white paint in here in places. Okay, take some of that edge off here. Shade that down. Yeah, you can erase a lot with your wet brush. Okay. Now, another thing that you have to kind of get used to with watercolor too, you have to kind of leave out a lot of fussy stuff. And make things a little bit more just suggested, because you just, with water and a big brush, or a larger brush, you can't get too picky with it. Maybe some people are better than others at doing that, but I find it sometimes it gets a little bit tricky trying to do certain things. Let's see, I'm going to take some of that out of there. Kind of blend it back. Okay. Now, we can go to my thin brush. They call it a liner. Sometimes they call it a rigger. It's making very thin lines. And you can use it like if you're trying to bring out certain textures, you're trying to do certain things like in the trees and stuff. I'm getting a nice gray here. Not bad. Almost like a Payne's gray. With a combination of the yellow and my blue and whatnot. So now, with the rigger, you can get a little bit fussier with that, all the little texture, how much texture you want to put in here. You know, with the tree, if you want to make the tips of the trees a little bit more defined, you know, you can kind of go over it a little bit more, bring certain things out. Now, if you want that to be a hill in the background, you could kind of do that. You can add just a little bit of texture to that. Just show one side that has a little shadow to it. Bring that down. Probably want to make that a little softer. And you can add a little bit of shadow up into here, just so it shows up a little bit more. Just a little bit on the edge. Kind of pull that edge back in, so it's more noticeable as being a mountain in the background. And it can still have some white showing through. Now, I'm trying to think what I can do here. Sometimes I spatter. You want to put some little texture in there, footprints of animals or whatever. You can do that. That kind of helps a little bit. But also, I'm going to probably go a little bit over. Let's see if I can find a brush that's kind of in between everything here. I'll take this one out of here. I'm going to just use that white. I got some white here. Now, I don't use the watercolor white. They call it Chinese white. But the only trouble is when you use it, it's not opaque enough, and it's not a solid color, so it doesn't hide too much. You can see through it. And so I tend to use acrylic paint for some of the texture. Now, if there's anything that you want to touch up, you can do that with your brush. You want to put some color on the roof, or you want to put some icicles hanging down. We can kind of pull some of that down here on the edge. How much? You might want to show just a little bit up on the other side. You know, maybe something hanging down off the edge here. You know, some texturing. If you don't want this big bite in here, you just touch it up. Put some white on it. You just pull it down, make it look more like icicles. Yeah, there, touch that up. Whatnot. If the edge here gets a little bit too bumpy, you can clean that up. Whatever you'd like to work on that. Like I was saying, that sometimes if you wanted to clean up some of the snow, you can put some of the white in there to kind of fill in some of that background. Maybe make it a little bit white out and back there. A little bit more white over in here. It's good for touch-up, very good for touch-up. And whatnot. I'm still a little bit concerned about that. If that stays too blue, I may have to do something maybe more with it. Let's put some white in there and put some more color back into this. There's a lot of little touch-up things you can do. You can put a little bit more white up into here. Let's take some of that out of there. I can get carried away with too much white in it. Just pull it around, break it up. Just to make it look like there's snow up on some of the branches over here. You can fill that in with a little bit more white. Make it look like that. So there's a lot of little things you can do. if this looks a little bit too dark still, it's kind of noticeable. You can always quiet that down too. You can take some of that out of there and pull that back, erase some of that, and just pull it back up into here, push it back, soften that out. Usually mostly white, putting the white into it. You can take some of that out and soften some of the edges down. You can make this a little bit wider up into here if you want. Yeah. Okay. If you do that, if you do it here, you might want to do it over into here too, so it doesn't look like that was an accident. Make it look like it's supposed to be like that. So break this up into here. Take some of this color out of here, put it over into this area. And 1, 2, 3, a little bit more up into here. Shade that down, put some blue into that. Let's see if we can add any more blue on this edge here. Pull it back in. Touch it up across here. Now here's the thing too. If you get to a point where you think you've got too much white, you can always go back in there and break it up with a little bit more blue. Whatever you want to do. It looks a little bit funny up in here, so you might want to touch that up. Take a little dab of white, just clean up the tip of the roof here. Yeah, that looks a little better. Whatnot. So there's different places that you can work around. But if you do it in one place, you just want to make sure that you repeat it somewhere else. You know, so somebody looking at your artwork says, well, how come you just put that particular shade of blue there, but you didn't use it anywhere else? So you have to make sure you get some of that back into your painting somewhere else, distribution of that particular color. Let's do the edge here, pull that back in. A little darker down here, across the bottom. So it has a contrast when I pull the tape off. Okay, we'll work it a little bit like that. So now what I'm doing is letting that kind of dry a little bit in there, and then we'll take a little bit of a darker color and kind of sort of suggest a couple windows here and there. You can even use a marker. Just take your marker. I don't know if I got one. Trying to find that one I had. Well, we can use this one. You can put like some of the texture of a window back into here. Just put something like that in there. And maybe something over here. I think there was a window over in this area. Something else over in here. So you can kind of paint some of that back in. I don't know if there's any other texture. There might be that's up to you if you want to show maybe like a door or something. But what you want to do is pull that down. If you put windows in, you make them elongated so that they look more like a window from a distance and not like a dot. Okay, so there's a certain amount of texture you can do. Whether you do it with a little brush or a marker, put some of that in. If you overdo it, you just take your brush and pull it through there and hide some of that. Just take some of that out. You know, whatever you want, how much texture you want to put in there. Okay. So we're almost getting to a point where we can kind of ease back a little bit. There's always something that you'll see tomorrow. You get up in the morning and your painting is dried out quite a bit overnight, and all of a sudden you say, "Oh boy, I need to touch up here. This has to be darker. You know, this has to have a little bit more color in here." And you'll find little spots that you can work on. This is going to dry lighter. You'll notice this will be different. And okay. Now there's always something that you can see in the picture that you can always add. You might need something over here, something, you know. You'll find areas where you can kind of fill it in. This corner might need a little bit more darker contrast in here. Maybe over here needs a little bit more texture. Whatever. But you'll find that as you go along, that there's certain areas that need to be touched up before you finish. What I see is certain areas, like underneath the eave, this could be a little bit darker here, a little bit darker over in here. I'm just referring to the photograph. Could be darker under there, you know, whatever. But that's pretty much the way it is. And like, I don't have my pick with me today, I don't think, unless I got one in the bag somewhere. But you can kind of pick at this and expose, you know, some of the paper underneath. I think this could probably use a little bit more darker shading into here. So there's a little bit of things that you can work on. But if you look at it tomorrow, you'll see after it dries out a bit, you'll notice more what needs to be done or doesn't have to be done, you know, when you by the time you finish up. So I'm just going to see if I always have fun trying to take the tape off here. Get it started. Oh, there you go. There we go. This gives it sort of a false matte around your picture here. So everything looks better with a matte in a frame. It just cleans up the edges a little bit. Okay, here we go. Boy, it came off pretty well. So there'll probably be some things up and through here that need to be a little bit darker. I don't want to get into it too much right now, but it's still kind of wet there. But like I said, you look at it tomorrow morning or whatever, and you'll notice that certain things have to be kind of brought out. I think in the building itself should be a little bit darker. Maybe I'm looking at the photograph, comparing it. There's certain areas that need to be brought out. This is kind of fuzzy through here. So certain things have to be kind of manipulated and worked out. But we'll see what happens another day. And I'll bring this back. I'm going to clean this up a little bit. And I'll bring it back and put it up so you can see what it looks like after it's been kind of touched up a bit. Okay? So I'm sort of running out of time, and I hope you enjoyed following the class a little bit. But what it is, it's not getting too fussy, but to try to see if you can paint more spontaneously, like, you know, and it seems like the end result is always better, especially with watercolor. So away we go. Brushes up, and we'll see you next week, okay? Take care now.